All right, good afternoon, and welcome to Spectator Diff, a brand new podcast from the most underpaid spectators in Overwatch, probably. My name is Brad, this is Matt, and we have decided to start a podcast to break down professional Overwatch because we have opinions, and gosh darn it, somebody needs to hear them. So we'll be focusing largely on Overwatch League and contenders. Let's dive into it. Who knows what this season will bring? Let's start with, let's just introduce ourselves a little bit, shall we?
Somebody didn't read the show notes before we started.
I read the show notes. I sight read. I'm a musician, so that's what we do. We do it live. Fuck it. Matt, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself? Tell us who you are. Let's introduce ourselves. Take it away.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. So this is not my first podcast. If you want to hear me talk about games and stuff, and maybe make you laugh or cry, I don't know. You tell me. Check that out. I have another podcast called Debate This, and you can find us everywhere at Debate This Cast. I'm on the internet at MC_DJ_MC, and I have opinions about Overwatch, because, boy, when the pandemic hit, did I need sports to watch, and there weren't no real sports, and I started watching esports, and now I'm addicted to Overwatch League. And so all of the energy that I had for 3 years of hockey in the NHL got poured into Overwatch League, and now you losers are stuck with me. Welcome to my hell. This is my Overwatch League podcast. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for that. And I am Brad. If you have recognized me on the internet before, it is because I have another YouTube channel by the name of Last Call Gaming, which was very active for the better part of a year and a half, is currently on hiatus, which is why I'm here doing this. If you're into Apex Legends, that is probably how you know me. But before Apex Legends, I was very big into Overwatch. Still am, because now that Overwatch 2 is on the horizon, I am simping hard for this game. So yeah, if you want to go check that out, it will be back. It's going to be something else. It's probably going to be Overwatch themed not too long in the future, because good lord, I am so tired of Apex. But that is for another day. But without further ado, you can find that at Last Call Gaming just about anywhere, and it is Last Call Gaming on YouTube. So on the other side of this podcast. So yeah, let's break down how this is going to work. Each week, date and time to be specified. Looking at Mondays, we'll see. We're going to be here to discuss Overwatch esports. So that is, for right now, going to be focused on the main league games, the professional big wigs. And when we're not doing that, we're going to be talking about contenders. As it turns out, because Overwatch is particularly bad at marketing, contenders has been going on in the background while this past mid-season tournament was going on. The Path to Pro is going on right now, so our homework wasn't fully done when we started this. I learned all of this morning. So probably next week we'll have a little bit of that to talk about. And yeah, you can catch our streams live here on YouTube. This one, YouTube kind of got a hold of us and said, no, you have to wait. So the next one will be live, but if you're watching this, we recorded this day of, and it'll be posted later in the evening today. But you can catch us here live when we record this, and you'll get the full cut before it goes on wherever you consume your audio. Let's see. Read show notes. Berate Matt. Yeah.
You got it. You're getting there.
So if you like what you see here, be sure to like this video. First of all, that really helps us. Throw us a little sub. Maybe leave a comment. If we like your comments, we will, leave them a like, and maybe we'll respond to some of them if they're particularly bad takes and we want to, say what we feel about them. So let's get into some headlines, because Midseason Madness is done. LA Gladiators have won back-to-back now. Let's talk about it. Are they the best team in the league?
I have a really hard time saying that anybody other than the LA Gladiators are the best team in the league right now. Straight up. Going into this tournament, I know that there was a lot of hype for Soul Dynasty, and yeah, that went well. I think that Shock has the potential to be a better team than LA. I don't think they're as consistent or as well disciplined as LA, and I think that makes LA the best team in the league. I don't think anybody from APAC even holds a candle to LA. Although we didn't see that. Did they play a single APAC team in the tournament? I don't think they did.
The Spark. I think they played the Spark.
Okay, so they played Spark, who certainly aren't Shanghai or Dynasty, but did about as well as Shanghai and Dynasty did in midseason. So yeah, I think LA is the best team in the league.
I'm gonna fact check myself really quickly because I'm not 100% on who they played. It was either the Spark or Philadelphia or both. But while I'm looking this up, I will go on to say I am inclined to agree with you to a point, but I stand by what I said the other day when we were not doing this live. I am, as much of a simp as I am for San Francisco Shock, I'm gonna say that they're the best team in the league. I am absolutely going to say that. I'm going to say that by the end of this season, and now this is on video on the internet, so I cannot take it back.
It's real now.
Yeah, it's real now. I am fully inclined to say that the San Francisco Shock is actually the best team in the league, despite having not won the last two tournaments, which is a ludicrous thing. And as I say that, the fact check is now in. They did play the Spark, and then they did ultimately not play Philadelphia because Philadelphia lost to Atlanta. But they did play the Spark, so I was right to begin with. That's all cleared up. I'm going to keep this bracket up because I'm probably going to need to reference that again at some point.
Yeah, I should pull that up too.
But anyway, Shock, arguably, I mean, it is arguable that they're the best team in the league. They are, if nothing else, hand in hand with Los Angeles. These two are in a league of their own, very clearly. No one can touch them. They scrim together. They are constantly... This was the first time in the league that we have seen two teams really show, like, adaptation within the game towards each other. It was an active, like, back and forth with the coaches. You could see... all of a sudden, we're going to try, they're expecting this, we're going to throw them with this. And for better or for worse, that's what we got. We don't get that very often, especially because it's so one-sided most of the time. APAC's barely even in the conversation. We now have confirmation that APAC is the lesser of the regions. We effectively know why that is, but ultimately, I think these two teams, if nothing else, are neck and neck. They both won one game this tournament versus the other, and it wasn't decisive, shall we say. It was as close as I think it was going to be. Shock have a tendency to outplay themselves, and that certainly showed its ugly head in the grand finals, but they have the formula. That's the thing. They have the formula. They're 12-0. I expect their success to continue. I don't know if the upcoming meta will change their undefeated in the regular season record, but you can't take away from the fact that Proper is probably the best rookie that we have. Kaluj and Mikey are about as solid of tanks as you can get, and I do think that on LA's side, Reiner, for as much trash as he talks, is getting close to being diffed on that front. He does his job well, but I think tank for tank, he's still top 5, but he's not top 3. So
yeah, I mean, I definitely see the argument that, like, Shock has game for sure. Shock could absolutely be the best team in the league. I think the question is, are we talking best team in the league right now or the potential? Because I think that San Francisco's max potential is way above LA's, but I think where they're hitting right now is not where LA is. I mean, let's look at the bracket, right? And let's talk about how these teams got to grand finals. So first round they play, which is winners 2. San Francisco drops a map to London, fair. Gladiators blank Houston, also fair. Next game, San Francisco blank Shanghai. Gladiators drop 2 maps to the Spark, which feels a little excessive. Next match is when Gladiators lose to San Francisco and get knocked down to the losers bracket. So there, I think we see the potential for the Shock to be the best team without question. But then you take Gladiators, you send them to the losers bracket. They only drop 1 map to Atlanta, who's won their way through the losers bracket. And then Gladiators puts up grand finals 4-2 on San Francisco. I think right now, Gladiators are just a better team, and I think a lot of that has to do with experience. I mean, if you look at the roster, like rookies wise, LA's really only running Patafan and Reiner as rookies because you've got Shoe Skewed and Funny Astro in the back line, which is the veteran back line of the league. You've got Space and Tank if you need him, and you've got freaking Kevster, who is a nutcase, and I would argue one of the most versatile, like top 3 most versatile DPS in the league. On the San Francisco roster, really your only return is Violet. And Violet hasn't looked great this year. I totally agree. Proper is the best rookie in the league. Proper's top rookie, no question to me whatsoever. I think that Kaluj is starting to look really, really good. I think he's one phase away from being, number 1 tank in the league for sure. Mikey, I'm less impressed with. I know you don't love Sam, and, Kilo has games that he pops off. He also has games that he's really quiet, which for a hit scan specialist is not surprising. But when your Tracer specialist is popping off and you either have to play your flex guy who isn't great and off angles and feeds a bunch in Sam, or your hit scan specialist who's really hot and cold, you're kind of locked. So I think that San Francisco definitely could be the best team in the league. I don't think they are right now.
I'll humor that to a point, because I think that LA's biggest win condition right now is actually Funny Astro. The most success that they had in this tournament was anytime he was in the lineup. I'm actually going to reference that Spark game because it did go to 5. That was when I looked at the Gladiators and I thought, I don't think this is their tournament because they're looking significantly less dominant than they have for the majority of the season thus far. And what I realized looking back at the match, it's Funny Astro every single time when it's a Funny Astro diff, and I will absolutely submit to the fact that LA's support line is far superior to Shock's. I don't know what the situation is there. I think in these 3 weeks, I really hope that they bring on someone else to, support the support line. But right now, the Violet and Finn combo is not quite cutting it. They find themselves separated in the weirdest possible ways, and they are completely and utterly held up by, a lot of times, by Kaluj's play and by Proper's. In terms of DPS, we're about to find out exactly how flexible Proper is, because I don't think the next meta is going to be as Tracer heavy. There's a truck in the background that's gonna translate. Oh well. There's yeah. I don't think we're gonna see as much Tracer in the next stage. So we'll find out. We know he's very, very good on the Sojourn. He popped off on Circuit Royale versus, I believe it was the Dragons that it was the first Gladiators game on Circuit Royale. Yeah. He popped off on the Sojourn. And Kilo, I want to see more from. I think Sam is kind of mid. I am very vocal about that. I gripe about it all the time. He's a great player, but he plays like a rookie. And I do think that is the biggest difference between Shock and LA is it's the rookie difference versus the veteran difference. Gladiators are at least 60% veterans at this point. So great. So this is my life now. I just live in noise in the background. But yes, I want to admit, I want to say very clearly, I'm not married to the idea that the Shock are 100% without doubt the best team in the league. It is neck and neck more or less with Gladiators. It depends on who shows up that day. Ultimately, I still think that long-term they will prove themselves to be the superior team, because the other thing that we're finding out as this season progresses, as Overwatch 2 progresses, in Overwatch 2, these rookies are having an advantage because they haven't suffered 6 years of the Pro League 6v6 meta. They're adapting a lot faster than a lot of the veterans are to the 5v5 lineup. They're finding new ways and new carry potential that wasn't there before. So going forward, we're gonna see. I still simp for the Shock. That's my own personal qualms, but I really do think, LA, congratulations to them, because good lord, what a win ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And okay, so we talked about LA winning Midseason Madness, but I think as a whole, we all lost Midseason Madness. And what I mean by that is there's been a lot of talk that this was the best tournament play-wise that we've gotten in Overwatch 2. There's only been 2 tournaments in Overwatch 2. I'm not going to argue with that. And I don't think that all of the games were bad. However, this global tournament thing seemed like a shit show. And since I'm live and on the internet and it lives in prosperity, hey, I'm not really that cool with Overwatch League going to Hawaii when everybody in Hawaii is saying, please don't come to Hawaii right now. I don't love that. I also don't love that, man, we're making London fly to Hawaii to play on 100 ping against Philadelphia. It just, obviously I know Philadelphia is not based in Philadelphia, but this whole, we have to force global tournaments, we have to make the West bend the knee to travel to Hawaii to have this limited playtime. Honestly, I'm surprised that APAC didn't look better in this tournament because they were playing from home. And sure, you're playing at weird times, but I would rather be sitting at my own computer at 4 in the morning than being in a hotel at 8 p.m., So I think that this global tournament did not have the same excitement that Kickoff Clash did. Kickoff Clash in Dallas live was a lot of fun. Midseason Madness in Hawaii was mid at best. And I would rather them put on a really fun digital tournament and maybe you keep the divisions separate than see them try to force another global tournament. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I mean, I am inclined to agree with you again. This was an objectively good tournament across the board. That being said, I don't understand the logic behind only flying NA to Hawaii to play on 100 ping and not bringing the APAC teams also to Hawaii to play on less ping. Because, I mean, at least from a game perspective, with Overwatch and ping, at about 80 milliseconds is when you start to notice it. 100 is not much worse, and it's not unplayable by any means, but, this is a multi-million-dollar company and a multi-million-dollar, esports industry. I don't understand why the APAC teams didn't also come to Hawaii to play the game so that everybody's on equal footing entirely. I'd wager there are probably some pandemic protocols that are getting in the way of that, probably specifically with China and the Chinese teams. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I would wager that's kind of where that all fell apart. With that being said, though, I don't know why we are keeping these regions separate at this point. The city thing, it is such a blatant mimic of professional sports, which from the beginning of an esport makes somewhat sense, but nowadays it's separated to the point where these regions are just not even close. Everybody was so hype on APAC being the best region, and then they just got spit on. Unfortunately, Philadelphia of all teams made it through the bracket. Nobody was expecting that. Everybody was hype on Seoul. Hell, I was hype on Seoul Dynasty.
Yeah.
With which being said, I still think they're a great team, but none of these teams hold even a candle to NA, and they don't scrim together at much, if at all, which cannot help these metas. APAC shows up with weirder versions of the NA meta, and then it just doesn't work. All these teams in APAC look good by comparison when you only play them against each other, but it's the cheerleader effect. But for esports, it's ridiculous. I don't know why we're still doing this in 2022 when they're literally pulling kids from every single region to play in both regions. Just you're making them move places. There's got to be a better way to organize this so that we're actually all on equal footing when it comes to these tournaments. All of that said, objectively, good tournament. This is the best we've seen of Overwatch 2 so far, because now they're starting to get much more used to the game. They're getting much more used to the format, and we're getting much more compositions. We're getting map-specific compositions. We're finding out team metas we're seeing variations of the meta that are working for these teams. We're seeing much more back and forth than we used to, and we're really finding out very quickly who the pop-off players are, because that kind of potential matters more in 5v5. So from an overall Overwatch standpoint, great tournament. From a entertainment standpoint, I'm exhausted. That is so much Overwatch in a week's time. I still haven't fully recovered. I don't know. I think at this point we can. I'll chalk it up to 50-50, but I am inclined to say probably not. Kind of a mid-tournament overall.
Yeah, I agree. I did like a lot of the things we saw. I mean, for better or worse, we saw every support hero and every tank hero played in this tournament.
This is true.
For better or for worse, I mean, Reiner locked Hog for 2 maps, and I don't think that was a good idea, but it happened. And I mean, I think that every support player or every support hero is actually relatively viable right now.
True.
But we did see a lot of different comps, and that's cool. We saw Dive with Diva. We saw Dive with Winston. We saw Dive with Ball.
We saw Nano Torb.
We saw Nano Torb in this tournament. What the fuck was that? A lot of weird things happen, but before we move on, because we have one last headline, I just want to nail down on this what the fuck is the APAC region for bit for one more second.
Sure.
Because what the fuck is the APAC region for? Right now, we have this group of teams that is locked in China, I mean, obviously, it has to be visa issues, right? If they're willing to fly London to Hawaii, there's no way other than travel restrictions that they wouldn't fly Shanghai or Seoul or Hangzhou to Hawaii. So it's got to be travel restrictions, and I get that. But these teams are locked over there. They're in a completely different time zone. They're not playing enough against NA to know what the hell is going on in NA. Most of the league is in NA, and I'm looking again at the Midseason Madness bracket. So London beats Atlanta 3-1. Seoul Dynasty, the best team in APAC, gets blanked by Hangzhou in the first round. Goes to the lower bracket, and Atlanta beats Seoul Dynasty 3-2. So the game of the week we're talking about here in a couple of minutes is the London-Florida match. And Florida beat London, which is a bummer, but I think we could have seen London go a little farther. They're upper mid-range in NA. There's certainly nothing to write home about. And looking at this bracket, they're at least 3 maps ahead of the best team in APAC. So I'll ask you again, what the fuck is APAC for?
I don't have a good answer for you, to be completely honest. Like I said, I am completely of the opinion that we should not have these separate regions at this point. I think you format it similar to contenders or even Path to Pro teams, where you just have teams with a team name and sponsors, and you don't affiliate it with the city. You just put a group together wherever it makes sense and get them scrimming against other teams of that caliber wherever it makes sense. And then if you're going to do a global tournament like this, you bring all the teams to one location, put them in a room, and you do the thing. Now, maybe I'm just an idiot on the internet. I cannot be the only person who has thought of this recently, especially with the strides that Overwatch League has been making. I wouldn't be surprised if down the road they do get rid of this and start to adapt it to the times. But good lord, they're freaking jackhammering outside my apartment. Of course, of all times,
of all the days.
But anyway, that aside, I do fully expect, I would not be surprised if in a year or two they do actually bring it more towards the contenders front as things start to recover more, because we are still dealing with the visa issues, and I really do think that that's the main problem that they're facing. I don't think that these regions, the APAC region as a whole, is a very prominent region for the game in general. And you need to find some way to include them in the pro league. And a lot of these players, many of them now former NA players. Smurf has moved back. I mean, the Philadelphia Fusion's entire team has moved to Korea, effectively. Yep. Like they're all from this region, and you do have to include them in the game somehow. Unfortunately, because of the visa issues, now you're faced with this is what you have to do now to make it work. And do I have a better solution for the time being? No. That doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize it, but I just genuinely don't have an answer to your question of what's it for. It's other than inclusivity. It's for inclusivity. Yeah. These are some of the best players in the world still. They need to be given a platform on this, in this league. But the only way to do it with visa issues, I think, right now is to have an APAC region. That's my best answer for you.
Yeah, and I think, I don't want to hammer on this too much longer, but I think the real answer is that, like, maybe this isn't the same league, right? There is an APAC Overwatch League, and there's an NA Overwatch League, and once a year they do a fun all-star game where they all wave at each other and play on 1,000 ping, and we laugh and have a good time. But like, I don't know. Anyway, I want to move on to our last headline. I want to talk about Vancouver dropping Shockwave, because Vancouver dropped Shockwave, which is weird. I don't know. Strange call.
Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. I think it is a signal that they are about to hire somebody else. DPay is now in the process of flipping the team. And they have the team as a whole has been making strides forward, and exponentially so. Did they win a map this last stage? No. Are they going to win a map in the coming stage? Maybe. Maybe. It depends on what they do in the next 3 weeks. I think that it has to be. This has to be an indication that they're hiring someone else, whether it be another tank player or another DPS player. I don't think they're going to gamble on Mirror being one of the two DPS the whole time.
I hope not.
He's a great player, but like the Mirror comp was not working for the majority of the last stage. Even in that game against Washington, we all had the question, why did they not play Shockwave? This is clearly why. This has probably been in the works for a few weeks now, but it has to make sense somehow, and it's got to be because they're hiring somebody else, because I don't know what their plan is going forward otherwise.
Yeah, I don't either. I have to imagine DPay's got his eye on somebody. I also hope it's another DPS player and not another tank. I think Mirror's Doomfist looked pretty good the game before they played him on Tracer, and his Tracer looked bad. Like, not mid. It looked bad. So I don't know. I think dropping Shockwave is interesting because if I'm looking objectively at the Vancouver Titans last two phases, DPS doesn't seem to be their main issue to me, but I'm also not in their coaching with DPay, and DPay, although he's not like my favorite coach in the world, I don't think you can argue he's been really successful. So I'm sure that DPay's got something cooking. I'm really interested to see what they do in these next 2 weeks. If they go into, what do we do? Is it June Joust? No, that June's gone. What's the next thing called?
Summer Showdown. Summer Showdown is the next
one. If we roll into Summer Showdown weeks and they're still pimping the same roster and they hardlock Aspire and Mirror, that's it, man. We're not getting any breadsticks this year. Vancouver is washed. We're not even going to Canada anymore. Fucking country doesn't exist. So I don't know. I hope that DPay has something planned. I feel bad, like, legitimately for Shockwave, because he was one of the only bright spots of the 2020 Titans. Went to Philadelphia, had all sorts of visa issues in 21. Came back, and honestly, I thought he looked pretty okay this year. So, I don't know, maybe he sucks to work with. I don't know him as a person, but I hope that Shockwave finds an opportunity to keep playing because I think he's a good player, and I hope that Vancouver and Deepe have something up their sleeves. If they don't, gonna be rough.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at, like, Deepe is a good coach, and he is stepping into a role that is particularly difficult, shall we say. I mean, Vancouver hasn't really had any success for almost, 3 or 4 seasons now, and you know, that's a hard thing to rebuild. That being said, this is kind of, this is his rebuilding phase, so I don't know why he thought that Shockwave was the weak link that needed to go. He has to have his reasons. I do feel for Shockwave, obviously. I fully suspect he will get another contract here, probably before the end of the year, which leads me sort of like a little segue on this same topic of over the next 3 weeks, I guarantee we're going to see more roster shifts than just Vancouver. I mean, already the Guangzhou Charge have completely like reinvented about half of their roster. And that's, we're only 3 days into this little break that they're taking. So I fully suspect that, within next week is probably when the big ones are going to drop. At this point, they're all definitely scrimming with each other. It's just not, been formalized in the form of Twitter posts and whatnot. But we're at that time of the season again where we're going to see roster changes. We're going to see some crazy things go down in preparation for the coming meta. So, I almost guarantee Shockwave will get picked up by somebody. Who knows who? Or maybe he'll just take a step back. He's been in the league a couple years. Maybe he's done just in general. Who knows? He clearly got a little bit blindsided by this decision based on the tweets. It wasn't his decision, that kind of thing. So who knows? I know Deepe has his reasons. I trust his coaching. He is arguably one of the best coaches in the league that we have. He's just up against a wall with the team that he's got. So we got to figure out, they have to find some cohesion there.
For sure. All right, well, I think I'm ready to move on to our match of the week, if you are, Brad.
Yeah, why not? Let's get that game of the week going on here. Nice little London versus Florida screen. Let me get the notes up so I know where our timestamps are. That's important. Let's talk a little overview of the game going forward. How'd you feel about this map? What were your thoughts going in? Your thoughts coming out? Let's just like preempt this a little.
Sure. So I, like everyone, was huffing London hopium, just like pour it into my veins, baby. I want London to go all the way. I have really enjoyed watching London this year. They've been a fun team to watch come into their own. They've been a fun team to watch put comps together and put, obviously practiced plays together that look like something. It's not like they're just running out playing deathmatch every game. And it's been fun to watch London for the last 3 years because I feel like this build has taken 2.5 seasons for them. This is not London showing up with a whole new lineup this season and saying, all right, we're doing it this way. This has been a building phase for London, and I was really expecting it all to come to a head here in the Midseason Madness, because we all talked a bunch about London's really good at Rush. Nobody else plays a lot of Rush. Hey, London's dive isn't that bad. Hey, maybe London wins this, and I wanted that to happen. So when you get to this final game for London, I think that they got shut down a little bit early, and the first time I watched it, I was like, man, they really dropped the ball. Like, they had no business getting reverse swept by Florida. But as I've rewatched it, I feel less that way. I feel like Florida played a really good game here. I feel like London also played a pretty good game here with holding map 5. We'll get there. I think that this was a tight match, and the way that the maps fell doesn't necessarily do justice to the gameplay, because I think map 1 and map 5 were a little bit one-sided. 2, 3, and 4 a little bit less so. So yeah, I'm bummed that London didn't make it farther. I thought Florida ended up looking better map 4, map 5 of this match than we've seen Florida look all stage. So that certainly gives me a little hope for Florida going into summer, considering the beginning of this midseason madness phase for Florida was rough. So yeah, I don't know. That's my 2 cents as an overview. Is like, I wish London would have gone farther here. I don't think Florida got a map win they didn't deserve. It was a good game. Watching it back, good game.
Very reasonable. I'm inclined again to agree with you on this. I myself did multiple lines of London Hopium before this match. It was a very disappointing way for them to go out, like all things considered. In my mind, this was much more painful when it first happened than it was when I watched back. Maybe because we watched the reverse sweep in real time. I'm not sure. That being said, London has to be at least a little bit proud of themselves at this point. They're putting up a substantial effort here and are making just as big of strides in the same manner that Vancouver are, but they're yielding results. I think they definitely have the talent and the capability to be, well, they are, in my opinion, a top 5 team still, despite the loss. These tournaments, they're monetized for the teams, but they're not necessarily the clearest reflection of the team's ability. So ultimately, this was a closer match than I anticipated it being. This was far less one-sided than I remembered it. It highlighted some very big weaknesses that we'll get to on the side of London. However, London is still, in my opinion, looking very, very good. Mayhem, they showed up this game. There was a certain point, and we'll talk about when exactly it was, that both someone and Xe just decided, you know what? I think we're gonna go on. I want to play Philadelphia now. And they
That's pretty much it.
They made their decision and they turned it on, and these guys just showed up and played the game. And that is, for better or for worse, that's how the cards fell. There were some interesting comp decisions. There were some interesting choices made on both teams. Ultimately, great game. There is a reason we chose this one to be the game of the week. Largely, I think it was because we're both still coming down from that copium high.
Yeah, I'm gonna be high on that for 3 more months. But
it's unfortunate, but I am very much looking forward to see what London does in the coming stage. So with that said, let's get into this a little bit deeper. So we'll start from the top, from round 1. 5 minutes in this initial rush. The London special. They full on go. Pretty much expected at this point. Very, very, very classic rush. Their strongest showing, arguably, of the match. Florida makes the decision to come out with the mirror. Awful choice. Absolutely awful choice.
Like, how big is the dick on Florida to think they can come out and mirror London's rush on Control Center? What are you thinking?
And it just, this first push isn't even close. I mean, within seconds, Backbone is on the side, just like picking away at Xe's checkmate and RuPaul. Like he's just giving them the business, and then they just come out swinging, and they're like, no, hey, guess what? We're gonna take this door, and we're just gonna stay there. Where is that? What is that at? 6:15? Where are we at? We're just shy of that on the replay right now. But like, I just completely Microsoft blue screened. I completely lost my train of thought as I was saying that. But like,
well, let me say this. Let me take it from you.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're right at this point. It's 6:15 in the video, and London goes basically for the touch the spawn door. They hold main choke on Control Center. I want to point out here that Hottie is, at one point, was 40% ahead of someone on ult charge, has had slam now for 3 whole fights, and someone still hasn't gotten it. And now Hottie's through the choke point. Someone still doesn't have slam. Like, this was just a bad idea, and definitely, like, I think the momentum London needed to carry themselves further. I think we lost that momentum, but coming out of this map, I mean, this was a beatdown on the Florida Mayhem.
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is London Spitfire in their element, and I think one of the biggest things to point out, it does come largely from Hadi. Like, the man doesn't often get low value shatters. Like, he has a very, very big knack for finding value out of the Reinhardt in the current meta. Not a lot of teams can do that. You've seen it a little bit from Houston. We've seen it a very little bit from Philadelphia. But when it comes to Rush, this is their zone. And for better or for worse, that's how they got to where they are in the rankings right now. You know, again, I don't understand Florida's decision to mirror this. It has not worked for literally any team that has tried to do it against London thus far. Very bold call. A little bit of a different story on the second map of Lijiang. We see Florida come out with a very interesting, like, Pharah comp. Where let's find out where that actually was. Somewhere in the ballpark of 10 minutes. And this is where we start to see, this is a little bit of the answer to the Rush, right? So much so that ultimately it forces Hadi to switch to ball. And we start to see a little bit more of the flexibility from London overall. You know, they weren't getting as much value with the Pharah, like, against the Pharah, because they were getting booped around a little bit. Exy was it wasn't Exy, it was Checkmate was on the Pharah. Finding, like, pretty solid value against like Landon, who was playing the BAP, and it just wasn't working out. Sparker doing pretty cool things on the Sombra, and, like, really starting to harass Checkmate and Nexi a little bit more. But they needed to do something else, and we started to see a ball comp, which we haven't seen from London pretty much at all up to this point. And credit where it's due, Hadi looked pretty good. Like, look pretty good on the ball. Like, let's where it comes in on the ball. It's somewhere around. That's overtime. He switches somewhere around, like, the 12-13 minute mark. Yeah, around 13:30 is when he swaps over. And at this point, you know, Florida Mayhem has capped. They're ticking up, starting to get a little bit closer, and they need to start making their swaps. You get Backbone on the Tracer to harass the backline a little bit more, and Sparker still finding actually surprising value with his EMPs.
Yeah, so I really hate Sombra picks right now. I don't think Sombra has a lot of value, but I think it's a really good counter to the Pharmacy. Like, it is a really good proven counter to the Pharmacy, even in Overwatch 2 after all of the kit changes to Sombra. So I don't hate it on this map. I think London takes a really, really long first fight, and it's kind of weird that they don't cap the point on it ever. And I think that, to me, was kind of the point of, like, okay, they've anti-rushed you. You need to switch up. And it takes them a fight or two to do it. But I really want to look at, if you jump to 11:29, I think is when it all really starts to fall apart for Florida, because they're rolling. London has the same amount of ults online. Everything is fine. And then Checkmate goes for this silly hero barrage that gets him just landed. And everybody else is dead because Onimo was hanging out with Checkmate. Checkmate was on a flank. Checkmate got no value. Onimo got no heals. Everybody died. So there you go. End of the map. And then the other thing that I do want to look at here is, if you jump to, like, right around 14 minutes, starts this buck wild final fight that just lasts the rest of the game.
Oh, yeah.
It's tied at 83% going into final fight, and we drag this out for, like, a 6-man swap. Things just get real bonkers. Hadi goes to ball. Someone switches to Doom. Exy goes to Tracer. RuPaul goes to Moira. Like, everybody's just trying to get back to point. RuPaul picks up 2 picks out of nowhere and gets some value. It's a very silly final fight, and this definitely, I think, is where you start to see the difference between high caliber and low caliber NA teams. And while I think London is right there at the top of the low caliber, I don't think they're quite on high caliber just because of how long it takes them to clean up this silly final fight.
I will say though, under the circumstances of this final fight, like there was some brilliance going on that allowed it to stay up as long as it did. Because right around 1440, I'm gonna back up again just to where it was. You have a brilliant stall by Hadi that it's like an excellent little bit of like stall mechanics with the ball. He manages to stay in. The whole team is pretty much dead with the exception of Backbone, who just dies as he leaves point, but he manages to stall long enough for Admiral to come back with Lucio, and it's through his mechanics. Like he's like, you know, maybe 5 or 6 good hits from dying himself, and manages to spin point, get out, cross the gap, get the health pack right as Landon is coming in to finish stalling the point. It allows for Sparker to come in with a massive EMP that ultimately like seals the deal on this map for them. And it's little moments like of brilliance like that, like little coordinated efforts that ultimately that are what London needs to do more of to really solidify themselves in that higher echelon.
Yeah, 100%. London looks amazing when they fall into sync with each other.
Right.
The problem is falling into sync for them isn't the easiest, you know? Like, they're trying to drive a really nice luxury car with a very fresh clutch, and they need a shitty Dodge truck that's been driven for 30 years, and the clutch is 8 miles wide. Like, their ability to fall into sync is just a little bit iffy. And I think it's a fine time to jump ahead to map 2.
I've already way ahead of you, buddy.
Yeah, man. So I'm just vamping through a YouTube ad. It's fine. I don't pay for YouTube. So anyway, we get to Eichenwald, and we're doing a dive mirror, which, you know, not what you would expect. At least initially, I would think, for defense from London.
Yes. So here's the thing. This goes back to what I was talking about with like the flexibility of things. London builds their comp around Hadi. Like 100%. They have to. He is the hard carry of their team. You know, Backbone is a great, very, very flexible player, playing both, you know, support and DPS. But really their comps are centered around Hadi, and to be honest, at the moment, he's almost exclusively main tank in his capabilities. So we're talking, you know, Winston, Ball, and Rhine. Ball being the arguable main tank in this situation, but it plays like a main tank in Overwatch 2. We don't see a lot of D.Va. We don't see a lot of Zarya from him. We certainly don't see any. I don't think I've ever seen him play Sigma. No, he doesn't, because they have Poco for Sigma.
Yeah, Poco for Sigma and D.Va.
Right. And I think this is where, because I do believe in the coming stage, D.Va will be a lot stronger. Will still be strong. It would behoove London to start utilizing more of Poco's D.Va, because he's a great D.Va player. He's an excellent D.Va player, stronger, I think, than his Sigma play. But it's a matter of finding a way to build the comps around Poco as well, because it's all entirely centered around their tank play. So the mirror was a weird choice, but like for what they have at their disposal, this seemed like the right choice in this scenario, and it worked okay for them. It wasn't a flop by any means, but it doesn't have the coordination that we are used to seeing on Eichenwald from other teams. Right. And this is where it starts. This is where I think where it ultimately started to turn around for London. It was in this map, because we started to see more coordinated effort from Mayhem than we were really getting from London, and this was the beginning of that.
Yeah, you said it before we started the video today, but Ike was a really good map for someone.
Yes.
And I agree. I mean, just watching this back, like, he chased Sparker the whole way through Castle, and Sparker managed to get out with a really lucky slide. And I think the only reason he got out was because Hadi put a bubble up for him. But yeah, someone looked great on this map. The dive started to click. Checkmate and someone were syncing up really well. And I like Shax on Tracer. Shax doesn't do the best job of playing with Hadi all the time.
Right.
And I think that was the big difference looking at this defense, was like, if you're going to run a dive defense, you've got to be really coordinated on your counter dives, and London just lacked that coordination because it was really just sending Hottie in and hoping something happened up until 3150. And at 3150, all the Florida shit just falls apart when they use 5 ults and get 0 value. Like, 0 value in 5 ults. They kill Landon again. Congratulations. Landon's always the first to die. It's cool. London doesn't need him. It's really, I think, pretty evident, you know, when a team ult dumps like that, that's also one of the giveaways to me of a high ranking NA team versus a low ranking NA team is the ultimate economy.
Yes.
And when you come out of a fight dumping 5 ults and you don't get anything, I mean, I look at that fight and you're like, okay, we've only picked a support. Like, maybe I hold Pulse Bomb. Maybe I hold Beat. Like, maybe I don't drop a 4th and 5th ult on top of this. We have 3 minutes. We pull back and we go again. Because at this point, like, Florida staggers for 3 more minutes and just never lines back up again to go in. And I think that they should have capped B. I'm surprised that they didn't cap B. London's defense certainly stepped it up once they got bridge high ground, but really it just comes to Florida falling apart.
I mean, this was at this last point of Florida's attack, like they really start to disconnect, and that's, you know, you have Checkmate trying to back cap the point, which, you know, there's some tactical strategy to you try to pull some of the enemy off of the high ground, off of Castle, but oh my god, this is driving me nuts in the background. But you pull some of the enemy off of high ground, but then you end up with a disconnect where you don't have the damage output coming from the tracer. Your tracer's no longer engaging the enemy tracer. You know, you might pull the enemy tracer to you because they're the fastest person to get there, or you end up with what London did, which is dive Hottie on top of you. And at the end of this attack, it just sort of falls apart for them. The little speckles of coordination that we were getting go away completely until we get to London's attack here, which I don't want to spend too much time on because it was fairly textbook and rather quick for the most part. You know, obviously they come out with like a quasi rush to begin with. It's not the same kind of rush that we've seen because obviously we have Backbone on the healer, and you know, no Lucio. It's a fairly slow and like patient rush, if you can even call it that. It just, you know, it was enabled by Hottie being able to hold shield and get his team into positions, and they were able to get value first picks. So I'm gonna skip ahead past their little rush attempt to when they start to take their second point push, which is where you start to see more coordination from the Mayhem. This is where I think someone started to shine, because you begin to notice he's taking the same position every single time on that corner castle height towards the entry choke of second point. And if you watch very closely, he starts to wait out the cooldowns from Hottie at 37 minutes. 37 minutes exactly. You can see 37:10, he waits exactly for Hottie to jump up. Misses the jump, by the way. He wasted his jump to go up after Mayhem's backline. Misses, but now he doesn't have the cooldown, giving someone free reign to go on the backline. Walks away with the 4K. Like, it's that kind of patient play followed by like calculated aggression that really started to showcase the Mayhem's ability here. And that's coordination. That's just coordination. You have to be telling your team, hey, I'm going here, so that if it fails, they can peel for you. And it's that exact same coordination in the opposite direction that failed London, not so much on this point, but later on in the match.
Yeah, and you know, I put it in our show notes here, like Florida's defense looks great.
Yes.
Florida's counter dive defense looks phenomenal. What happened? Oh boy, it was a C9. It was a C9. C9 number 1 of this game. And you know, they didn't lose. Oh, obviously, okay, fine. They lost the whole map on a C9, but it's not like they C9'd from a choke the whole way to the golden box of victory. It was just once they got to bridge. The one thing that I want to point out from this map before we move on to the next one is the support difference. RuPaul and Sir Majed are out in their own world, couple space cadets doing their own thing. And yeah, I mean, like when you got Bone back in, Backbone Bone back, just he attack, dude. His Zen is so sick right now, so sick.
Oh, it's
And
true.
Landon's a pretty good flex support. He dies first a lot, but I think that's because he plays easy dive targets, not because he's out of position. There's one moment that I want to point out here, and I'm going to send you back a little bit. But if you cut to like 35-12, 35-10-ish, it's right at the start of London's attack. London comes out fast. They get point A pretty quickly. Oh, wait, Sir Majed died. How'd Sir Majed die? What happened there? Oh, it was a railgun. That's fine. I'm sure Sir Majed won't come back out to contest, considering everybody else is leaving. That sure would be silly. Hey, wait. What's someone doing? Someone got pinned. He's dead now. Okay. We're recontest. We're gonna recontest. There's checkmate. All right. Xy's dead. Someone is dead. Okay. Let's call it. Let's all go home. We don't need to do this again. Oh, okay. Our Tracer's about to die. Tracer's dead. Great. You sure wouldn't see the supports come out. It sure would be silly if you saw the supports come out. RuPaul, what the fuck are you doing? RuPaul, why are you here? Like this is a mess. This is an absolute mess.
Oh yeah.
Dude. I don't know. Yeah, you're fine. All the coordination we talked about Florida is true. Their defense looked really, really good. Their support looks like dog water. Luckily, you've got XD with a lot of movement, Checkmate with a lot of movement, someone with a lot of movement, but...
Okay, I want to be a little bit more forgiving, believe it or not, on the supports in general. Actually, not just with London and not just with Florida, but across the board right now. Because the more I think about this, the more I think this is really the case. What we're seeing with Overwatch 2, and especially in the pro meta right now, is these supports are being forced to take more aggressive positions than otherwise would be productive, especially in 6v6, because you don't have another tank to defend you or peel for you. And you have, in a lot of cases, one less shield, just less barriers in general, less CC, all that stuff. But because of that, these tanks, it's a lot more fraggy. The tanks have to be a lot more aggressive. And with most of the supports, in order to get value, you have to take more aggressive positions. And I think it's very easy to say, hey, the supports are crap, like they're getting killed all the time. But really what it is, it ends up being a DPS diff in some cases, because if your DPS on the other team is just absolutely cracked out of their skull, which we're finding is the case with a lot of teams specifically in NA, but also across the board in the Pro League, they're gonna find those value targets. Like, you know, Sir Majed, why is he dead? Oh God, why did that rhyme? Why is he dead? He has to take that poke position as the Zenyatta. He has to be flinging, you know, right clicks down lane to try and get, you know, alt charge to try and get kills. And the minute he pokes his head out, well, what's going to happen? Well, Sparker's going to find it, because that same lane is the one that Sparker's looking straight down. So it's not so much like, oh, he's out of position. He has to take that position in a lot of cases to get value early on. And, you know, when your DPS players can find heads and click those same heads, it's a lot harder to stay alive as a support. You know, that was a lot of people's complaints early on with the betas. Like, it's hard to play support now. Well, no, you just have to have the ability to also frag and be smart.
Have to be better.
Yeah, you have to be better. And we're even seeing at the pro line that doesn't make it less difficult. It's just you have to be better. And so, you know, do I think their positioning is perfect? God, no. Do they still make a lot of mistakes? 100%. But across the board, it's less of a support fault and more of a DPS diff, which comes to play later on as well, because Xe eventually decides, you know, we're just not going to lose today. And so I think that let's segue to map 3, because there's not much else to talk about with map 2. Ends on a weird C9 because everybody just sort of walks off of point. And just decides, we're not going to contest this. This has gone on long enough. They get it here. It's fine. Map 3, Watchpoint Gibraltar. Good pick, I think, by the Mayhem. Let me get that in the video. It's roughly here-ish. And they get to attack first. We see Exy on the Widowmaker. We see Checkmate start out on the... Wait, does he start out on the Echo, or does he change? I think he...
Checkmate changes, I believe.
Someone going for the cheeky little hog hook at the beginning. Checkmate has to. Yeah, he does.
Checkmate goes to Tracer.
Yeah, he starts on the Symmetra to get his team to the opposite high ground. I think he misses here too. I can't remember, because they're focusing on the hog hook, and then they don't show it. No, he missed his. Oh no, he got the teleporter. Okay, cool. Bad camera angles there. But then immediate value from the Widow. Killing Hottie, who gets isolated, which, again, slept by RuPaul.
Yeah, slept outside of his bubble as well. Like, you can see where the bubble went down. You can see where the sleep happened, and his momentum carried him past the bubble. So, like, it's a bummer... Or it looks like maybe he didn't get the bubble off because he gets the bubble off after the anti-nade. It's a bummer to lose Hottie that early. I don't think you can really blame Hottie for that. I mean, you're trying to dive the opposite high ground. RuPaul gets a good sleep on you, and you die. That's the life of a main tank, right?
Pretty much. And sometimes that is how it be. It do be like that sometimes. He bubble poked in the wrong direction. Really, I want to retract an earlier statement as this plays in the background. I said this was like the Exy show. Map 3 was more the someone show. He ends up walking away with multiple like 4 and 3 and 4 pick scenarios that enabled by everybody else, but he just finds himself in a position to capitalize on just the most insane nonsense. Not so much in the offense, but he really comes alive in the defense, which we'll get to in a minute, if I remember. Yeah, I remember that correctly. But yeah, on this offense, good, strong defensive push by London. Certainly better than we've seen from them as of late, because, I mean, their defense has generally been, average at best.
Certainly not what anybody's writing home about.
No. But solid defensive effort here. Shax on the Tracer, I want to see more of. I do. I really do want to see, especially if they're going to commit more to this, like, Winston dive defense. I want to see more Shax on Tracer. He tends to find good value. But ultimately, this does become the Hottie show right around 49-50. A little bit before that, 49-40 and stuff like that. He's finding London just pinned in the room and is just swinging away, batting them around, and there's nothing they can do about it. And London does this multiple times throughout the rest of this match, where their squishies are all just piled up in a small room, and someone's like, "Oh, you're gonna be there? Well, now you're not going to be. Goodbye, everybody," and kills every single one of them. This opens up the door for them to push further in. I think Hottie comes back rather quickly, but it at least allows them to get around the bend. And with, 50-some seconds remaining, they managed to win the team fight and pull forward into second point. Where are we at?
Yeah, London's defense really fell apart. There's this moment. I have it pulled up perfectly on my screen. I had to frame by frame to find it. But there's this moment at 48-44 where Hottie gets down to 19 health and he is surrounded in server room. And somehow he doesn't die.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the last good moment that London had in this whole map. Because, like, as soon as they pull back from that, like you were saying, someone gets the squishies isolated in a room. He swings on down to Georgetown. And then all of a sudden, they cap point A, and London gives them, like, half of B for free. I mean, not even taking poke damage out of spaceship, just letting them walk cart the whole way to the second curve of point B. I don't really get that move, Like, I understand wanting to set up on high ground. I understand not wanting to take that initial ground fight. That makes sense to me. But the amount of time that it takes it takes London to contest Florida on point B, I think is the real falter of this map. I think they gave up. Well, okay, the real falter of the defense. The attack was the real falter of the map, but we're not there yet.
Right.
It was their real falter, and they cleaned it up. But I think that this map should have ended at A, and even though it didn't end at A, they should not have gotten as much of point B as they did. That's my thought.
Well, point B started out off on the wrong foot as well, because they were effectively staggered. They capped point B on this really weird, like, Hottie's is diving in from server room. Shax is nowhere to be found. Half the team is just coming back from spawn. It was like this weird, like, they weren't exactly staggered, but nobody was on point. It wasn't a C9. They capped, they managed to cap point A just for free, effectively, while no one was contesting. And as soon as it caps, all the cards start to fall again. Everybody's in bad position and starts to take massive losses. Basically, all of London dies as the gates are opening for point B, and Mayhem get a very solid push for next to nothing at that point. And by the time London is able to stabilize, it's too late, and a lot of the damage is done. They've got cart all the way around towards almost towards the end of point B at this point, and there's nothing that can be done. The defense just falls apart completely. They managed to scrape a fight win from basically nothing towards the end of the round, and what do you know? Now, yes, London has a win condition, but it doesn't quite exactly come to fruition at the end of the day. So let's talk about their offense, actually.
Yeah, so we come out, right, like, Florida's got about 75 meters, hasn't capped point B, looks ultra winnable for London. Like, looks like this could be an easy cleanup, 1-2, call it a day. And then it's not. Then it's really not. It starts off kind of okay. They do this hog ego check that everybody's doing right now. Hottie almost catches checkmate. Like,
yep.
Checkmate blinks at just the right time, but Hottie almost wombo combos him. And honestly, if he catches checkmate there, that's probably the map. If you lose your tracer that early, obviously your tracer is going to get back quickly. You're going to contest again. It's not going to be all of A, but you're going to lose so much time that it's going to be a lot harder to shut London down. So yeah, and then at 57-25, I'll jump right around to 57. Suddenly the back line dies.
Yep.
Someone in checkmate dive the back line.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody from London's even looking at them.
Nope.
And it's game over.
Mm-hmm. It sends the entire team back to spawn. It was a very solid, coordinated dive from Florida. And again, it's these little, like, moments of very, very solid communication within the team that alter the team fight in a very big, significant way. And the win condition on this map is like, check XE and check checkmate. Like, but they don't do that. And then just shortly after this, the very next team fight, Hottie's in a room batting around the two supports who are pocketing one another, mind you. It's a Brig and RuPaul on the Ana at just shy of 58 minutes. He's just batting them around, getting no value. He can't kill the Brig because Winston just does tickle damage, and then he has to back out. It's a complete zero value ultimate from him. He wastes an entire Primal Rage to get nothing. We talked earlier about how he finds value in, like, the weirdest shatters, finds exactly no value from this Primal. And that pretty much sums up the majority of this offense. It was a whole lot of little value and little value effort from London. They just didn't have it. They had an answer, but they couldn't do anything. Sparker's doing his best, finding heads every now and again, but XE gets to effectively run around for free, find cheeky little picks that are effectively like pixel peaks. There's this moment, oh my god, it's Shax at 59 minutes where he's like cheekily pushing the cart, and like with XE on the high ground, like XE's not gonna notice that and immediately poke him from the top. Like, Shax was already like half health. He didn't even have to hit a headshot, just does it for good measure. Like, it's it's little things like that. It's again that stupid back cap strategy to like pull people off the high ground, but you're pulling the wrong person. The one guy who can just turn around, look at you, and kill you immediately. It's like no, and without leaving high ground. Like it's these weird decisions. They're spread out the majority of this next fight, and finally towards the end, the last 26 seconds, you have Hadi trying to find any little scrap of value from this push, and ultimately ends up getting separated and body blocked in the lower corridor near the health pack. Like, it was a non-starter effort for London. Not their best showing, and it kind of sums up how the rest of this match goes for them ultimately. God, Landon with the getting killed with Backbone still in trance, and then finding himself cornered in the lower room as well with Shax. They both die, or no, Sparker. They both die to a primal rage from someone. They force Hadi into the corner, as someone finally did put Hadi in a corner, and that's game. He can't touch. Like, just sloppy.
I mean, I think that it really is a lot of miscoordination from London on this. I think this was a great map pick from Florida. I think Gibraltar points out a lot of the problems that London has, which honestly I think is multi-level control. Once you get a lot of verticality, London struggles. They're single plane teams. Teams that play a lot of rush are obviously going to struggle with high ground control, and I don't think that Hadi's Winston looked bad on this map. He made a couple of questionable choices, and he definitely fed his brains out a few times, but like, I don't think that his Winston was necessarily the problem. I think their weaknesses just got extorted. I will say, I would have really liked to see Landon go over to the BAP on this map just to get Hadi some more support on the high ground. Because, specifically, there's that one moment we talked about earlier, like right around the 58 mark, where Hadi just primals into the supports and feeds for 6 seconds and dies. And that's it,
Yeah.
That moment. Okay, if you throw an anti-nade into that room, both of those supports die. However, no anti-nade came into that room because Landon and Backbone are getting dived by someone in checkmate.
Right.
So Hadi primals into that room. When he hits primal, who was playing Brig on that map? Onimo only had 70% ult charge.
Yep.
And when Hadi's primal is done, Onimo had rally online. So like, you gave him that rally for free, and I don't think it's terrible to primal both supports in a small room, but if you're going to primal an AoE healer like Brig or Lucio, you've got to get some mitigation for the other healing with an anti-nade, and that's not coming. So I personally, after those first couple fights didn't work, like, I'm all about teams, if you've got 60, 90 seconds left and your shit isn't working, everybody pick your main. Pick your favorite hero. Just go out there and try and get the point. I don't care what happens. And I really would have liked to see Landon switch to BAP there just to get like an immortality field or something to try and support Hadi a little bit more. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Landon works a little bit better. I think his BAP is a little stronger than his Ana is personally. But then that being said, like the Ana Zen is a very, 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 very strong comp, and if you're gonna have Backbone in on support, you're almost exclusively locked to that. So I don't know. It's a consequence of kind of how their comps are shaping up. And maybe he changes, but I don't know if at that point, I don't know if it really makes a difference, because it was the coordinated dive and the disjointed like response from London that really was their downfall there. When you have someone waiting on cooldowns to go send your supports to the spawn room, like, it doesn't matter who they're playing at that point.
Right.
But then we move to London's pick again for push. We get Coliseo, London back on the rush comp that we know and love, and suddenly it has less of an effect. Let's see. Let's get this rolling again. Florida making the questionable decision off the bat to once again mirror this, and yet this time, Xe has entered the chat.
He sure did, Brad. He sure did.
Starts to find the first pick in almost every fight on this map. Almost every single fight, Xe has killed someone as the fight begins. And this is just now starting to play. They're starting their first engagement. Oh, I'm sorry. They didn't mirror. Florida went with a dive, a Genji Winston dive with Xe on the Sojourn. And that is correct. Now I remember how this played out. This was the right decision. What they probably should have done at Lijiang Tower. But Xe immediately finds Sparker almost out of the gate. And that's where it falls apart, because when you don't have that incoming damage and everybody immediately gets to put Hottie in the corner, Admiral's up in the rafters, gets picked again by Xe. RuPaul's finding Landon's one and only lamp, and they just get to walk on them for free. They pull out a pretty sizable chunk of land here out off of one fight, and they can't respawn fast enough to contest it. And there's not like a lot to cover in this. It was a closer match than it should have been. Some cheeky plays from coordinated efforts from Backbone and Hottie with the walls. But man, overall, this was just the Xe show. He was diffing Sparker the entire time. Like, I don't think Sparker, let's see, even early on in this, Xe's got almost 20% of an ult advantage on Sparker. And sure, Backbone is outpacing Checkmate, but that doesn't really matter so much because they're not winning the team fight. When they do win the team fight, they're having to push back so much ground that they're not really gaining enough to take advantage. I think they take advantage early, like once on their first push after the team fight that they win. But again, like, it's hard for them to get a footing because Xe's just killing everyone. You can't gain footing when everybody's dead.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this was the map that the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, that was awful. London, what are you doing? And when I went back and rewatched it, I was like, okay, this was not a bad game for London.
No.
London did not look bad on this map. Like, Xe showed up. Xe showed up. Checkmate also landed a 3K blade and then another 3K 60 seconds later. Like, this was a DPS diff map for sure. There were a few weird decisions. Backbone got a little flanky, and so this comp, right? Like, the London Spitfire comp of May, Sojourn, Rhyme, Lucio, Bap. There is so much value in the synchronicity between Backbone on May and Hottie on Rhine.
Mm-hmm.
Those walls enable your Reinhardt to have value in these long open stretches that you have in Colosseo. Like, if you just try to walk Reinhardt down that big open field in Colosseo, you're going to get chewed to bits, and you need Backbone's walls to either cut off shot angles, give Hottie something to recharge a shield behind, or my personal favorite, give him something to charge into. And this map, basically, so I'm watching now, I'm at the 117 mark. That's when Florida takes the lead back from London. And they don't even get to the butt scratch. Like, they don't get the whole way to the checkpoint, but they take the lead back. And after that, I think everybody at London starts to get a little tilted, and everybody wants to be a hero. And that's when I started to see Backbone really go on a couple of these hero flanks that I was like, bro.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly.
What are you doing?
I know exactly what you're talking about. That actually reminds me of something, because when I rewatched this, I wanted to make a note of it. I forgot. Like, this starts to become very quick play, like very, very quickly after they take point back. And you're right. It was the flanks. It was the flanks from Backbone, which ordinarily I didn't hate so much. He got a couple of picks, but he found himself isolated, and then the close range damage to support the Rhine wasn't there. Like, the reason that this works is exactly as you said. It's the coordination. It's the coordinated effort. It has to be like perfectly timed. And if you isolate any component of that rush, it falls apart very, very quickly. It's playing in the background right now, the flank that you were talking about, where he's just in their backline. Yeah, he's completely away from his entire team. He finds Animo, but then because of that, Checkmate's able to kill Hadi and isolate him. Like, now your tank is dead, and then the whole rest of the backline falls apart, and Backbone can't do anything. Like, all he can do is, guess I'll die now. Like, it's a weird hero flank. It doesn't make sense. It's the kind of thing that you only see even in ranked games. Like, it's not even so much quick play. It's what you would see in Overwatch ranked. Like, it's something that would work in a less coordinated environment, because it is, by definition, less coordinated. And now, and then Florida gets to walk. They just get to walk at him and waste time, and they don't even need to get to the butt scratch. It just kills time at this point, and it keeps happening, and that's where it really just goes south for them. They just decide, all right, we're not going to be doing a coordinated rush anymore, and everybody just dies. It's how it is.
So here's my thing, right? I have not played the beta, so I have not gotten my own hands on what I lovingly refer to as dumpy robot mode.
Yes.
And I like the concept of dumpy robot mode. I think it's a fun idea. However, the more I see it in competitive play, the more I start to dislike it. And this map is a really good example of one of the reasons why I don't like it, which is, Florida. I keep saying the wrong team. Florida takes the lead at around 5 minutes. They never touch the barricade again, ever again. They never even get the bot really back to where the barricade is. They push it into London territory a few times, but then they just stand back and force London to come into them. And okay, there is value to that strategy. I'm not saying like BM on Florida. I'm not saying that's a bad play call. Like that's a legitimate strategy to this game type. However, it makes for really lame Overwatch, and it makes games less competitive when there's no pressure and no necessity for a team to fight for their lead, right? Like, they got a 20-meter lead, and then Florida just got to play deathmatch defense for 5 minutes, and that was it. And that bums me out. I don't hate push as a game type. I think it needs some real structural tweaks to be viable at a high competitive level, or else you're just going to get, in push, we've seen one of three things. You either see both teams get to 50 meters and somebody wins it by 10 meters by pushing it and then playing defense. You see a team get absolutely rolled and you actually see a map completion, or you watch 10 minutes of deathmatch.
Yeah.
And I think more often than not, it's 10 minutes of deathmatch, and that's fine, but it's not what I watch Overwatch League for. Like, I didn't come here to watch Overwatch League players play deathmatch. I came to watch them play Overwatch.
I think what it comes down to is just the team differences, because I agree with you to a point. I do really like this mode, actually, in a lot of ways, as like the cap to a series, because the tug of war aspect of it, especially when you get really closely matched teams, is very it's very suspense building. I actually look back to that the Vancouver Washington Clown Fiesta from a couple weeks ago. Like, it ended so poorly, but there was a moment where you're like, holy crap, they're gonna pull this off, they're gonna get a win. And it's like moments like that where the teams are closely matched, even in a Clown Fiesta like that, where you're like, oh yeah. And so there's got to be a way to facilitate this better. They're tweaking the mode with like the timing and things like that. They did some of that in the most recent beta as well. So I don't expect this to be the full on what we get in the live game. Is it better than 2CP? I tend to think so. 2CP can go on for a calendar year if you let it. This has a hard limit, which I think is objectively a better game mode, and they need something like this. Is it the best replacement for 2CP? Probably not. I think we should kind of go the Team Fortress route, maybe like a 5CP kind of thing, which is also more of a tug of war style kind of deal, but who knows? But generally I do tend to agree with you. I think in this instance, it's like it's two evenly matched teams that had to go the boring route for how they played the map. and you know, it's just going to be like that sometimes. Your San Francisco Gladiator matches, it'll be a different story. Your Gladiators versus your Vancouvers will be a complete steamroll kind of thing. It just becomes a flex at that point. But up until then, it's kind of, you're gonna get these maps from time to time. It was deathmatch. It played like deathmatch. It played like it played like ranked at some points, and that ain't it. So now, speaking of clown fiestas, we're gonna talk about map 5.
And all the bad feelings that we had about this game from the first time we watched it,
man,
turns out they all came from map 5.
It was map 5, because this was the most frustrating thing for me to watch, because what do we have to start the first map on Oasis? Remember, this is London's pick. They're telling the other team, we're taking you here because we can beat you here. And then what do? They play freaking Lucio Moira, and they have Backbone on the Sombra and Sparker on the Tracer. All right, I'm less mad about, I'm gonna pause the video in the background. I'm less mad about the Lucio Moira. I'm furious that Backbone is playing freaking Sombra and you have your Sojourn player on Tracer. Sparker looks like crap on Tracer. Like, yeah. And that's being nice. Like, he's not a Tracer player. He gets hard diffed by Checkmate the entire game on this, and they stick with it. At no point do they go, well, actually, that's a lie. Eventually, he does come out on the Sojourn, but at no point in this first map do they go, maybe not. Maybe not with the Tracer on this. I don't get the Backbone pick at all. You know, under these circumstances, I would have much rather seen, some maybe Brig, Bap, maybe Brig, even honestly, even like Brig, Zen, Brig Zen, good lord, brain not work, brain no do thing, Brig Zen. But Lucio Moira, this whole comp is disjointed. There's no value to be had anywhere. And then you have Landon playing what I'm only going to call the biggest throw pick of the week, because he got next to no value. You know, I think they got one ultimate to Florida's 2. It was a 2-to-1 ratio at times with this diff. Like, this was a support diff, a DPS diff, and Hottie was just left out to dry because he had nothing to play off of.
Yeah, this comp is garbage day. Just absolute garbo. Your Moira has 0 value. Okay, so I've been waiting for the exact moment so I can pause it and tell you the timestamp, and it's right around 1:31. RuPaul gets Nano. Landon is 40% to Coalescence.
Yep.
I'll say that again. The Ana gets Nano. The Moira is 40% to Coalescence. There's no value in this comp. You have Backbone, who's invisible, running around on the flank. Sparker, who Moira can barely heal. Hottie, who's off doing ball things. And Admiral on the wall. What is the Moira for? What's the point? This is before the rework. You don't have her weaken ability. You have no good targets. Are you going to dive with the Moira? Try and dive RuPaul, I guess? There's just no value to this comp.
Well, because, I mean, what is Moira going to do in this situation? First of all, what's Moira going to do in this situation when Landon and Admiral are sticking close together and Hottie's off in Narnia trying to dive the backline? What are they going to do? Who are they healing? Because what else do you have? You have 2 flankers? I'm sorry. Where are they finding any value unless they're face checking the rest of the team? At which point, where are they finding value? Like, they can't do damage, they can't do healing. It makes no sense with this composition at all. It's the most disjointed nonsense that they show up with in this match. And I don't understand the choice here. I don't understand saying this is our map pick. This has worked for us at some point. Against who? Who is this worked with? Like, under what circumstance?
That's my feeling, right? Like, you pick Sombra, who really is only good to counter a single character at a time in this new patch. Like, she is just not super viable. If you're trying to shut down a Pharah, you're trying to shut down a Doom, you're trying to shut down a Ball, and you need that extra damage and that, like, 1-second hack, okay, I guess. But I don't understand this pick. And I assume that you put Backbones in instead of Shax because you want the more versatility, because Shax is mostly a Tracer guy. but it can't be Sombra. Like, it just can't be. There's just no, who do you even want to hack? What's your goal? Are you trying to burn down the Winston? He has a bubble. Are you trying to burn down Checkmate? The hack doesn't last long enough for a Tracer. Like, what is the goal of this Sombra?
I mean,
the
goal
Sombra and the Moira are the two things I just do not get.
The goal of the Sombra, it was very clear by how Backbone played it. He was going after the backline. He was going after the backline unsuccessfully, I might add, because every time they found him, he got slept. Like, the number of times that RuPaul just whipped around and put him to sleep, and what is absolutely remarkable is he didn't die as much as he should have. I can only imagine while he was waiting to be like woken up, he was just spamming the recall button because he got out of there like scot-free like a half a dozen times and was like somehow alive, but still found no value. That's the problem. Like, didn't do what he set out to accomplish, got countered hard. And suddenly we're at match point effectively. Like, well, exactly. It is exactly match point on the second map on what is it? Not city. What is it called? City Center.
University.
No,
University is the inside. This is Gardens.
Gardens. Yeah, we go to Gardens, and again, disjointed. We have Lucio Moira, which works okay with Hottie on the Reinhardt. It works better than on Ball because they have to be in one place at one time, and at least like Hottie can face check while the other two do some healing. In theory, Sparker's still on the Tracer, bad choice. Backbone's still on the Sombra, worst choice. And immediately, like right out of the gate, same deal. Hacks the healer, immediately gets slept and recalls. Like, no value. No pick was exchanged. No Hottie's at next to no health. Like, already, because where are the healers? They're alive. I'm watching this back and I'm like, oh, they're in the they're in Narnia. That's where they are. They're in Narnia, and now they're separated and getting just completely just spit on. And then they go for the spawn camp. They just go for the spawn camp because they're like, hey, guess what? We're now gonna win this because you guys are falling apart. And again, it's the healer alt charge is closer, but again, it's 61 to 45 and 49 to 36, and it was a mess. The whole thing was a mess.
So I have in our notes here, like when it comes to round 2, map 5, I wrote, oh, London is tilted.
Yeah.
Because I don't see why you're running Hottie Rhine and not running the rest of your rush comp. You've got Hottie Rhine, Admiral Lucio. Why did you put Landon on Moira? Okay, Moira's fine with Rhine. Why did you put Sparker on Tracer? Why did you put Backbone on that other girl, Sombra? Like, why not the May? Why not the Sojourn? You know Checkmate's on Genji. He's gonna be diving in. You need May's slow. Someone's gonna be diving in. You'll get value out of the wall, and again, May's slow. Like, I really feel like London played Colosseo in their comp and then felt like, we just got beaten on our thing. We can't show it to them again. You know what?
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't play your thing the best way that you can play it, and you got to try your thing again. And I think that would have been the move on this map.
Well, I mean,
City Center's
go ahead.
City Center's a bad Reinhardt map. I understand not wanting to run Rhine on that, but like, when you get to Gardens, if you're gonna run Rhine, build the rest of the comp. Don't do this weird thing. They use all 5 ults, they get the point, and then they lose. That's it.
I mean, I'll go so far as to say, like, I'm fine with Ryan on this map. I am 100% fine with Ryan on this map because there's a lot of close quarters where his hammer just gets value. And if you're playing the May with him, you now have places to close them off. There are tight spaces that you can just prevent them from escaping. You can give Ryan a wall to charge into if he doesn't have one. There's a million of them for him to find. They're short pins, so they have less time to react. Like, all of that entire point is effectively a small space for him to swing for free if you're coordinated enough to be like in one place at one time. They don't have to be taking super crazy flanks. They can deathball this and do okay. I mean, granted, I don't think Florida was in a position where they were going to be stupid enough to just all, sit in a corner and get swung at. But At the same time, it would have been a better strategy than whatever this is, because this is nothing. What this is nothing. Because do you like this comp? Because it's not a comp. It's nothing.
It's absolutely nothing. And that's the end of the game.
Yeah, and that's the end of the game. It ended with a whimper.
Yeah.
It was a whimper.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think I have a couple of takeaway questions here from this map as we're looking on the other side, or this match as we're looking on the other side. And the first one, I'm going out of order here, but the first question I have for you is, Florida beat London here and then moved on and got spanked by Philadelphia. It was a 2-3. I don't remember exactly that game. I did watch it. I don't remember Florida looking particularly good. I also don't remember Philly looking particularly good, but I do remember Philly looking relatively dominant over Florida. So my question for you is, if this goes the other way, if London beats Florida, does London beat Philadelphia?
In my opinion, yes. I know that London had in my opinion, Philly had the lower bracket run that London should have had. And I you know, obviously the circumstances didn't pan out that way. But I've seen their rush comp. Their rush comp is not good. They only thrive as a team when they're popping off individually. Obviously, Belis Rea is one of the best ball players in the league. He's a good ball player. But I don't think in a 1v1 between both teams there's a scenario where Philly really wins unless MN3 just goes absolutely nuts and Belis Rea goes absolutely nuts simultaneously. If it's just one of them, I think if London is playing to their strengths, I don't think there's a scenario where London loses that matchup. But the world may never know now that they lost in the second round of the lower bracket.
Right. You know, I mean, at this point, it's certainly all hypotheticals, and what does it matter anyway? Because it's over. But I do think that, like, Florida was the one hurdle London needed to climb over to have a really reasonable shot at winning their way through the losers bracket. I think they probably could have beaten Atlanta again. There's no way they could have beaten Gladiators.
No, 100% no.
I don't think that London makes it to grand finals in that scenario, but I do think if they beat Florida, they coast their way through the losers.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this. There was a scenario where they were absolutely top four. Like, there was a scenario in that lower bracket run where they were absolutely top four and probably should have been, but ultimately it just didn't pan out because they dropped the ball against Mayhem. And it's not even that they dropped the ball until the last map. It's that Checkmate, Nexi, and someone were just like, hey, we want to win today. And they won. Yeah.
So my last little question here is, we know the patch they play on in summer is going to be different. We don't know what that patch is yet.
Yes.
We're assuming we're probably going to see some Orisa or some Junker Queen, probably a little bit less Tracer, but it's kind of early to tell what support lineups are going to look like. My question for you, London has found a lot of success on the backbone back of Bone Back's back. So, if Zen gets nerfed, does London have anything?
Honestly, it depends on how everything else shakes out with the meta. I am currently still theory crafting. I'm typing out this question so that it's on screen for us. But anyway, it depends on how the rest of the meta shakes out. I'm going to be honest with you. They did nerf Zen, but they only took 25 points off of his health. Everything else still is as is. So I am pretty confident at this point. I'm like 90% on this, that I think Zen Ana is still going to be what we see at large in the next meta. With that said, it's going to really, really, really depend on how the tank situation shapes out. I have a hard time seeing a world in which Rhine is going to still be strong. But then again, I'm still not confident that the changes that they made to Orisa and Junker Queen, and even the existence of Junker Queen, are going to be enough to really force either of them into the pro meta, because the pros just find the different way of doing things because they're hyper coordinated. And I don't know if the new changes really lend themselves to that. I'm not confident in it. I want to say that the answer to the actual question, can London win without Zen? Solid maybe. Solid maybe. It's 100% dependent on what else happens with the pro meta.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's a great take. My thought is London doesn't need Zen to run Rush.
No.
So if Rush is viable, London will look great.
Yes.
We have yet to see London's dive look good without Boneback on Zen. So I need to see, maybe Zen stays viable. Maybe Backbone's good on other flex support heroes. Maybe Landon and Admiral. Maybe Admiral can play something other than Lucio. There's definitely possibility there. But my biggest concern for London future-wise is if Zen becomes less of the viable support pick, what happens to their dive comp and who can play main support?
Yeah, I mean, we know that they don't have the budget to pick up another player. I don't know. I just think there's a world in which London just exists in a state of pretty solid, and I don't think for a while, unless the meta shifts specifically in their favor, or God, maybe Hottie's just the Giga Chad on Junker Queen or Orisa, and it doesn't even matter. But there's a world where they're just really solid, but they can't touch the top teams. And that might be the story for the duration of the season. We don't know. I don't think they need... I do think that a big portion of what they do relies on Boneback. I think Zen is just such a strong pick that having that in their pocket is just... It's a win condition in and of itself. But otherwise, I don't know. Like I said, this going into the next meta is going to be huge, and I think we're going to see a really big shift in who goes where, to some degree. Specifically in the mid-tier teams. I don't think the top is going to matter much, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and talk about it. I don't have much else to say. We've run pretty long, so let's knock out
power rankings
and call it a day. So typically we would do some predictions here. Overwatch League doesn't come back till the 11th, so none of that for you. But today, power rankings.
Let's just top down this. Top down this.
Top down?
I think LA Glads and Shock are pretty definitively at the top. I will put LA above them because they won. I will also say it's probably no particular order, but that's just me simping for the Shock. I think these two teams, no matter what you do going into the next meta, these two teams are going to pioneer the next meta in some way. Their success is going to be, at large, kind of on the shoulders of the DPS players and what the DPS meta ends up being. So maybe I'll regret this in the future, but I think these are the top two teams in the league, in the world right now, and then there's a tier break. I think there's a tier break.
Big fat tier break right there.
Yeah. In fact, I'm gonna be mean. I'm gonna put two. I'm gonna put two full tier break sections in this, and we're gonna call it a day. Don't at me, or do. I don't care. And then we have what is a lot closer.
Yeah. So here's where we start to get into where does APAC actually line up with NA? Because I know everybody's hype on APAC right now, and I just don't believe it. I think that Dallas is better than everybody in APAC, and Dallas didn't look great. I think... Fuck it. I think London's better than everybody in APAC. At me, nerds. I do. I would take London over Seoul Dynasty. I said it.
Fair enough.
I said it out loud.
Let me vaguely get these in a rough order here. I am again inclined to agree with you to an extent. I think this huge chunk of mid teams it's gotta get the spark in there too. I think this huge chunk of mid teams does include the top 4 APAC teams. Why is Chung doing there? Get out of here. I think that this does include the top 4 APAC teams, but I will give you that they are towards the bottom of those power rankings. I'm inclined to still put Seoul towards the top of them, despite their performance in the Midseason Madness. It wasn't a strong performance, but you cannot deny the fact that they have had, again, outside of this, they have had a very, very solid run in the regular season. I just think they had a bad showing. That's, it's a tournament. Sometimes that happens. Hard to say from 2 matches that they're really the worst of the APAC teams. I think they're above Shanghai. I think they're probably now below the Spark. And I would go so far as to say Philly is probably tied with Seoul. I'm going to put Philly below Seoul because I'm not convinced. I'm not swayed by all of the hopium from this tournament.
Nope.
I think they rode a very, very comfortable bracket for the most part. And then they got 3-1 to Atlanta. So we're going to give them, I'm going to call those 4 in that order in this tier. Now, who goes above them? London Spitfire goes above them. Dallas Fuel goes... crap.
So, yeah, right. Okay, so here's my thing. I'm re-looking at the tournament. I'm looking at standings. I'm looking at schedules.
Okay.
Dallas looked like ass this whole phase.
Yes. Agreed.
I don't know if I expect Dallas to get much better in the next phase, because Dallas looks like a team struggling to play 5s. They look like they were better at 6s than they were at 5s.
I agree.
Straight up.
Full agree.
I think London and Atlanta are better than Dallas.
Agreed.
So I would say, and you know what? I'll say Atlanta is better than London.
Yes.
I think Atlanta diffs London.
I agree.
So I would say Atlanta, London, Seoul. Did you have Seoul Hangzhou or Seoul Shanghai?
I had Spark Seoul and then Philly Shanghai.
Okay. So I would go Atlanta, London.
That's where we're
at.
at.
And then I would go Spark Seoul, Dallas, Philly Shanghai.
That's where we're at. I'll go with that.
That's my thought.
I'll go with that. And now we have 2 more outliers in here. The Houston Outlaws, which I will say, additionally, probably better than, you know what? I'm going to put them between Spark and Seoul. I think that's fair. I'll put them. I think they're. Go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know about that. Because putting them above Spark and Seoul says that Houston is better than Dallas. And I don't know if I agree with that. I think I might put Houston right below Dallas.
Okay. Here, let's do it this way. We're talking mid-season power rankings going into the next meta. So, we haven't talked about this much going into the next meta. The Doomtay, the Dawn Tank question. If Junker Queen proves to be as solid as she was for quick play matches, and is truly part of the meta the next phase, more Doom Tank. I think
that's fair. Yeah.
Which puts me in a weird spot because Houston's entire success is on the back of Dawn Tank.
Dawn Tank and Merit's Sojourn.
Yeah, they don't look particularly great when Piggy is in play. I really hate Pigma. I hate Pigma so much in both name and in concept. His Rhine's okay, and he does his job pretty all right on Winston as well. But their success hinges a lot on the back of Dante and their DPS. And Sojourn still should be strong going into the next meta. I don't think there's a scenario where someone overtakes Sojourn as a better pick with the other choices. I could be wrong. Obviously, we're theory crafting here. I don't know. Houston had a decent showing. I don't. I think I still agree with you that they're not better than Dallas. So I will put them. I'll put them between Dallas and Philadelphia. I won't. I won't do that. I'm putting them below Philly.
Do we need to move Seoul down?
No. Okay. I think Atlanta, London, Spark, Dynasty, Fuel, Philly, Outlaws is relatively fair, and then Dragons and Mayhem, probably fine with leaving Mayhem where they are. I think in this tier they are still at the bottom of that tier. I know that they beat London. I know that they did that. I don't think that they beat Shanghai. I don't think that they. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. We said it a bunch. It's Xe, man.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, Xe's a great hit scan player, but he's a great hit scan player when he shows up.
Yep.
And he doesn't always show up.
It's exactly it. You know, they don't beat Shanghai. They didn't beat Philadelphia. So I don't see a scenario where I can put them higher than that. And then we have another tier break, and then we have all of the clowniest fiesta, which I'm not going to dive too deep in. Actually, I lied. There is one thing that I'm going to change here. I'm going to do a tier break. I'm going to do Toronto Defiant, and then another tier break.
Okay, so I wanted to bring that up. I think that tier is a little bit bigger, but I do think there are two bottom tiers. I would put Toronto, Washington, Boston, and Chengdu in a tier, not necessarily in that order, but in a tier above New York, Paris, Vancouver, LA, and Guangzhou. And I say that because Toronto and Boston have the right amount of team synergy that if they're really on it, they can beat any other team in that bracket, right? They can beat any other team in that tier and also stomp Paris or Vancouver or whoever. And then Washington and Chengdu don't have the team synergy, but have the individual player effort that, like, if Decay fucking pops off, or whoever is on Chengdu right now, is that still Leave? Is Leave on Chengdu? If Leave pops off, then they can beat anybody in that tier and still blow Paris, Vancouver, LA, Guangzhou out of the water.
I'm gonna take this a step further. I'm gonna take this step because we keep we keep dropping back to like where we were and saying, talking about what they've already done, not what they're about to do. I'm not gonna do two separate tiers here. I'm gonna put Toronto at the very bottom of that upper mid tier.
Okay.
At the very bottom, because they have been on the up and up. I think there is a scenario where they are more competitive going into the next stage. Because they have been performing better week by week for the past month at least. And I am not going to move. I'm not moving Washington Justice, Vancouver. I'm not moving any of them around right now other than in that bottom tier. I'm going to call this bottom tier ambiguous tier because there are so many just problems afoot with these teams, largely with the coaching. We've talked about that at length, that Washington needs to fix something with their coaching because it is like Supreme isn't even watching the matches in real time. Boston, they have moments of brilliance, but like those moments of brilliance aren't enough to overcome. Like they still can't beat any of these mid teams. They can't do it. They would lose to Toronto. They have lost to Toronto. They would lose to every single other team in that upper bracket right now. I don't see a world in which they come back and that changes in the coming stage. Chengdu, same deal. It's like, yeah, if Leave pops off, great. But if Leave doesn't pop off, then no go. Vancouver, I want to give them more credit, but I just don't know what they're going to do yet. If they do something that makes sense, I'm willing to change my opinion on this. They're liable to go up and down. Guangzhou is restructuring. Same deal. And the same thing can be said for just about everything else on this list. I can't put any of them above it because anytime one of these teams faces another one of these teams, it's just gonna be the same story. We're gonna watch a lot of things that go good, and a lot more things that go wrong, and at the end, we're all gonna be left wondering, why did we just spend 2 hours watching that?
Yep. So okay,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I was gonna say there is, so who is at the top of your bottom tier right now?
Washington. This bottom tier, again, this is ambiguous. This could go up or down, but generally speaking, I'm inclined to put Washington at the top of it.
Let me give you this argument as a Washington Justice fan. I think Chengdu is better than Washington.
Good enough. That's good enough for me. that's good enough for me.
After that, I fully agree. But I think Chengdu is better. I think Chengdu has a better chance of beating Shanghai Dragons than the Justice have of beating Toronto Defiant.
I'll go with that.
Yeah,
I'll go with that.
And that sucks. I love the Justice. That sucks. It sucks. But oh my God, unless something changes in Washington.
Hey man, this game is pain. This game is pain. You just gotta
so bad.
You roll with them punches.
Bad, dude. All right, so do you want to give us the top to bottom readout? What do we have here?
So we have at the very tippity top, we have Los Angeles Gladiators, San Francisco Shock. That's pretty much unanimous, no arguments there. Two tier breaks because I really do think that they're that much higher above everybody else at this point. Atlanta Reign, London, Spark, and Seoul, the top 4 in the second tier, followed closely by Philly, Outlaws, Dragons, Mayhem, and then bringing us up at the bottom of the mid-tier teams is Toronto Defiant. Who knows? They might climb or fall next stage. We'll see. And then in the last tier, in no particular order, but like kind of a little bit of an order, are Chengdu Hunters, Washington Justice, Boston Uprising, the Vancouver Titans, Charge, Eternal, Valiant, and New York Excelsior. I got really lazy with those last few. They're just kind of there. I don't think anybody there is better than anybody else. I really am like sticking to my guns on these teams can go, either direction depending on which way the wind is blowing. So, not much of the most. They're kind of like weak rankings if we're being honest at the bottom there, but that's how it plays out sometimes. So. That's what we're saying. That is your official Spectator Diff power rankings going into the new meta. If you don't like it, this is a dictatorship, not a democracy. It's too bad.
This is where we've planted our flags, so we can only become a more reliable Overwatch League podcast from here.
True.
Either we're really right and we have a lot of validity to begin with, or we get better. Those are the only two options.
True.
I will say,
story.
I think that one of my alarms went off. Let me start that sentence over. I think that you're right to put Vancouver as high as you did. If there's any team in this lower bracket that's going to climb and redefine themselves this phase, it's Vancouver. This will be the first time DP has really had enough time with a team to turn them. So,
yep.
If anything changes, that'll be it. But I think I feel pretty good about those. And you cool to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll wrap it up if you're cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So, before you do the outro, let's just thank you or anybody that watches this going forward, listens to this going forward. Obviously, this is the rough take day because it's our pilot episode. So,
yeah.
A heartfelt thank you and howdy do to anybody listening to this. We can only go up from here. Much like the Vancouver Titans, there is nowhere to go but up. So
exactly,
so thank you for that, and Matt, I'll let you just close us off here.
Yeah, man, that will do it for the inaugural episode of Spectator Diff. Again, please subscribe to us here on YouTube and like the video and do the comments and all of those. It's been a minute since I've done a YouTube channel, so do all them YouTube things, kids. And if you're listening to the audio show, subscribe to your podcast app of choice. Brief note about the audio show. It'll probably be 2 to 3 weeks from when we're recording this pilot episode now before the audio feed becomes regular. Podcast feeds just take longer to set up than YouTube channels. So that'll be happening. But you can follow me on socials at MC_DJ_MC.
And me on all socials at lastcall_gaming.
And until next time, just remember, we're better at watching Overwatch than you. See ya.
Bye, everybody.